Have you ever wondered whether Buddhism rejects the idea of God? Or is it simply a different way of understanding spirituality? In a world where most religions place a divine creator at the center of existence, Buddhism takes a unique and profound approach. No almighty ruler, no divine judge, no cosmic architect determining your fate. It may sound radical, even unsettling to some, but what if I told you that this very absence of a supreme deity leads to an even deeper sense of responsibility, wisdom, and inner peace? Today, we're going to explore this fascinating question, not through assumptions, but by diving into the heart of Buddhist teachings, tracing the words of the Buddha himself, and understanding what it truly means to seek enlightenment without relying on a higher power. Let's begin by addressing a common misconception. Many people assume that Buddhism must either reject or accept the idea of God, in the same way that other religions do. But Buddhism doesn't fit neatly into these categories. It is neither theistic nor atheistic in the conventional sense. Instead, it offers a path based on personal experience, wisdom, and the understanding of reality as it is. When Siddhartha Gautama, the historical Buddha, began his spiritual journey, he encountered many different religious beliefs. Some spoke of powerful gods, others of cosmic forces controlling human destiny, but through his deep meditation and insight, he realized something revolutionary. Suffering and the end of suffering are not determined by an external being. They arise from our own actions, our own mind, and our own understanding of reality. This is where Buddhism diverges from many other spiritual traditions. Instead of looking outward for salvation, Buddhism teaches us to look inward. The law of karma, the principle that our actions shape our experiences, takes the place of divine judgment. Rebirth, the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, operates not as a reward or punishment from a deity, but as a natural consequence of our thoughts, words, and deeds. And nirvana, the ultimate liberation, is not granted by a god, but attained through profound wisdom and inner transformation. So, does Buddhism deny the existence of gods altogether? Not exactly. In many Buddhist traditions, celestial beings known as devas exist, but these beings, powerful as they may seem, are not creators. They are not all-knowing, nor do they control human fate. Like humans, they too are subject to karma and the cycle of rebirth. They may possess great merits and reside in heavenly realms, but they are not the ultimate truth. The ultimate truth, according to Buddhism, is something far beyond the reach of any god. It is the realization of impermanence, the understanding of suffering, and the path to freedom. This perspective may feel unfamiliar, even unsettling, to those who have grown up with the idea of a supreme being governing the universe. But at its core, Buddhism offers something incredibly empowering. It tells us that we are responsible for our own spiritual path, that the answers we seek are not found in blind faith, but in mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom. Think about it for a moment. What if your happiness, your peace, and even your destiny were entirely in your hands? No divine intervention, no external salvation, only your own choices, your own insight, and your own awakening. This is the radical yet deeply compassionate message of Buddhism. It does not ask you to believe in something beyond your understanding. It invites you to see for yourself, to question, to meditate, and to experience the truth directly. So, whether you come from a religious background or consider yourself a skeptic, Buddhism offers a path that is neither dependent on belief nor limited by doubt. It is a journey inward, a journey of self-discovery, a journey toward ultimate freedom. If this perspective challenges the way you see the world, that's a good thing. Buddhism is not about accepting ideas without question. It is about exploring, experiencing, and understanding reality as it truly is. What do you think? Does the Buddhist view of divinity resonate with you? Do you find comfort in the idea of self-responsibility, or does it feel daunting? Most religions are built around a supreme being, a creator, a savior, a divine force that governs the universe and guides humanity. For many, the idea of God brings comfort. a sense of purpose, and a moral foundation. But Buddhism, it takes an entirely different path. Buddhism doesn't reject or oppose the idea of God in the way that atheism might. Instead, it shifts the focus, not on a divine power controlling the world, but on human experience, on suffering, impermanence, and the search for inner peace. Imagine for a moment that you are suffering. Maybe it's the loss of a loved one, the weight of uncertainty, or the pain of unfulfilled desires. In moments like these, many turn to faith, praying for guidance, for salvation, for divine intervention. But what if the answers weren't found in the heavens, but within yourself? Buddhism says, look within. Siddhartha Gautama, the man who became the Buddha, was born into wealth and privilege. He had everything a person could want: power, comfort, luxury, and yet none of it protected him from the reality of suffering. He saw old age, sickness, and death, and he realized that no amount of wealth or prayer could change this fundamental truth. So he left his palace, his family, his royal status, and set out on a journey, not to find a god, not to seek divine revelation, but to understand the nature of suffering and how to transcend it. What he discovered changed everything. The Buddha did not deny the existence of gods. In Buddhist cosmology, there are celestial beings, divine figures, and higher realms of existence. But here's the key. These beings, powerful as they may be, are not creators, not rulers, not ultimate sources of salvation. They too are subject to the laws of karma. They too experience impermanence. This is why Buddhism does not focus on worship. Instead, it emphasizes wisdom, self-discipline, and self-reliance. Because the solution to suffering is not found in devotion to a deity. It is found in understanding. And this is where Buddhism takes a path unlike any other major religion. Most faiths see sin as the fundamental problem, and salvation as the answer. But Buddhism sees suffering as the true challenge of human existence, and wisdom as the path to freedom. Think about that for a moment. In Buddhism, there is no divine judgment, no concept of original sin, no eternal damnation. There is only cause and effect. The choices you make, the actions you take, the way you understand and interact with the world. Karma is not about reward and punishment handed down by a god. It is simply the natural law of cause and consequence. A life lived with greed, hatred, and ignorance leads to suffering. A life of generosity, compassion, and wisdom leads to peace. Not because an external force decides it, but because that is the nature of existence itself. And what about enlightenment? The ultimate goal in Buddhism is not to be saved, not to reach heaven, but to awaken, to see reality as it truly is, free from illusion, free from attachment, free from suffering. Nirvana is not a place, not a paradise granted by divine grace. It is the liberation from craving, from the endless cycle of birth and death, from the struggles of the human mind. And the Buddha did not achieve this through faith, but through direct experience, through meditation, through deep understanding. So, what does this mean for us? It means that in Buddhism, the power to change your life is not in the hands of an external force. It is in your hands. Your suffering is not because of divine punishment, but because of causes and conditions. Your happiness is not granted by a god, but cultivated through mindfulness, compassion, and insight. This is not an easy path. It requires effort, self-reflection, and a willingness to let go of illusions. But it is also a path of immense freedom. Because when you stop looking outside for salvation, you begin to see the truth within yourself. And that truth, it is not something you need to believe in. It is something you can see, experience, and realize for yourself. So, does Buddhism reject God? Not exactly. It simply asks a different question. Instead of who created the universe, it asks, what is the nature of suffering? Instead of who will save me, it asks, how can I awaken? And in those questions, in that search for truth, lies the heart of Buddhism. What do you think? Does this perspective resonate with you? Does the idea of self-reliance bring you peace, or does it feel challenging? Let's go back in time. Imagine ancient India, an era of grand temples, powerful priests, and sacred rituals. The air is filled with the scent of incense, the sound of Vedic chants, and the deep belief in gods who control the fate of the universe. People offer prayers, sacrifices, and devotion, hoping for blessings, protection, and salvation. And then, amidst all of this, comes a man who changes everything, a prince who walks away from his palace, his riches, his privilege. He sits beneath a tree, unmoved by hunger, unmoved by fear, determined to find the truth. And after days of deep meditation, he awakens, not because of divine intervention, not because of a revelation from the gods, but because he saw reality as it truly is. This man was Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. What makes this story truly remarkable is not just that he attained enlightenment, but how he did it. He didn't claim to be a prophet. He didn't claim to be a messenger of God. He didn't even claim to have received wisdom from a higher power. Instead, he found the answers through direct experience, through deep insight, through understanding the nature of suffering and the mind. And when people asked him about God, he remained silent. When asked about the origins of the universe, he redirected the question, not because he didn't know, but because he saw that such debates were distractions. While philosophers argued about creation, people continued to suffer. While theologians discussed divine power, human beings were still trapped in ignorance, attachment, and fear. So the Buddha shifted the conversation entirely. He asked not, "Where did we come from?" but "Where are we going?" This was a revolutionary idea, a complete departure from the religious traditions of his time. He didn't teach commandments to follow blindly. He didn't demand worship, sacrifice, or faith in an unseen deity. Instead, he offered a path, one based on self-awareness, mindfulness, and ethical living. It's not about pleasing a god. It's about transforming your own mind. The Buddha taught that suffering is not a punishment from a higher power. It is simply a result of causes and conditions. Desire, attachment, ignorance. These are what trap us in cycles of pain and dissatisfaction, and liberation is not granted from above. It is achieved by looking within. This is why Buddhism does not have a central God figure, not because it denies the existence of higher beings, but because it does not place them at the center of spiritual life. In Buddhist cosmology, there are celestial beings, deities, and powerful forces beyond human comprehension, but none of them hold the key to enlightenment. None of them can free us from suffering. That responsibility rests with us alone. Think about that. A spiritual tradition that doesn't ask for prayers or blind devotion. A philosophy that doesn't promise salvation through faith, but through wisdom. A path that doesn't look outward for answers, but inward. This idea is both liberating and challenging. It means that there is no external force to save us, but it also means that we are not powerless. Every action we take, every thought we cultivate, every moment of awareness brings us closer to freedom. This is what makes Buddhism so unique. It does not offer easy answers. It does not rely on unquestioned belief. It invites us to explore, to experience, to awaken. And perhaps that is why, over 1,500 years later, the Buddha's teachings continue to inspire millions, not as commandments from a god, but as an invitation to see, to understand, and to be free. So what do you think? Does this approach resonate with you? Does the idea of self-liberation feel empowering or intimidating? Imagine this. You're walking through a forest, and suddenly an arrow strikes you. Not just any arrow, a poisoned one. What would you do? Would you sit there, questioning who shot it? Would you demand to know what kind of wood the bow was made from? Would you ask about the archer's background, their motives, or the type of poison used? No, you would remove the arrow. You would seek treatment. You would do everything in your power to heal. This is exactly how the Buddha saw philosophical debates about God, the origins of the universe, and metaphysical speculation. He was once asked about the existence of a supreme being, about what happens after death, about the ultimate nature of reality, and he remained silent, not because he didn't know, but because he knew those questions wouldn't help end suffering. Instead, he told this parable of the poisoned arrow, because while people debated theology, suffering continued. While they argued over creation, life and death marched on. Hunger, sickness, loss, fear. None of these were solved by speculation. The Buddha's focus was clear. Not on theories, not on beliefs that could never be proven, but on practical solutions. On a path that could lead to freedom, here and now. Think about how different this is from most religious traditions. In many systems of belief, understanding God or following divine will is the key to salvation. But in Buddhism, liberation doesn't come from external faith. It comes from action. It comes from understanding suffering, not as a punishment from a higher power, but as a natural consequence of attachment and craving. It comes from changing our relationship with the world, not through prayer, but through mindfulness, ethical living, and wisdom. It comes from taking responsibility for our own lives, not waiting for divine intervention, but actively working to free ourselves from ignorance and illusion. The Buddha didn't deny the existence of gods, but he made it clear, even if they exist, they are not the answer. Even celestial beings are trapped in the cycle of birth and death. Even they are subject to impermanence. So instead of asking, does God exist? Buddhism asks, how do we end suffering? Instead of, what is the origin of the universe? It asks, what is the cause of pain and how do we free ourselves from it? And that is the power of this teaching. It strips away distractions. It refuses to get lost in endless debates. It demands that we focus on what truly matters, our own transformation, because speculation won't free you. Beliefs won't break your chains. Only action will. This is what makes Buddhism unique. It is not about blind faith, but about seeing clearly. It is not about waiting for salvation, but about walking the path yourself. And if you're ready to explore that path, to go beyond theories and into experience, then keep walking with us. What do you think? Do you see the wisdom in the Buddha's approach? Does this perspective challenge the way you've thought about spirituality? Buddhism often speaks of celestial beings, devas. So does that mean Buddhism believes in gods? Not quite. There's a deeper truth here. Devas are not supreme beings who rule over everything. They are not omnipotent, nor are they the creators of the universe. Instead, they are simply another form of existence within the vast cycle of samsara, the endless wheel of birth and rebirth. Just like humans, animals, and other beings, devas are bound by karma. Their existence may seem blissful compared to ours. They live longer, experience less suffering, and dwell in realms of light and pleasure, but they are not free. Even Sakka, the king of the devas, sought wisdom from the Buddha. Why? Because he understood that power, luxury, and pleasure do not bring true liberation. He knew that even a divine king is still caught in the cycle of suffering. Despite his high status, he humbled himself before the Buddha, recognizing that the ultimate truth is beyond mere celestial pleasures. This is one of the profound differences between Buddhism and many other spiritual traditions. Buddhism acknowledges the existence of divine beings, but does not see them as all-knowing saviors. No deva, no matter how powerful, can grant enlightenment. They may offer blessings, they may help those who practice goodness, but they themselves are still subject to karma. They too must eventually face the decay of their existence and be reborn elsewhere. The true path to liberation does not lie in seeking divine favor. It lies in wisdom, ethical conduct, and meditation. The Buddha himself did not teach people to worship devas or beg for their intervention. Instead, he taught the path to nirvana, the only true escape from suffering. This is the core of Buddhist understanding. No matter how high one rises in the cycle of existence, whether as a human, an animal, or even a deva, everything is impermanent. The only way to break free from this endless cycle is through the cultivation of wisdom, mindfulness, and compassion. So the next time you hear about devas in Buddhism, remember, they are not gods in the way many religions describe. They are beings, just like us, walking their own path through samsara. And just like us, they too seek the truth. The question is, will we continue to chase temporary happiness? Or will we seek the path that leads beyond it? One of the most profound teachings in Buddhism is dependent origination. It is not just a theory, not just a philosophy. It is a fundamental truth about existence itself. It teaches that nothing exists on its own. Everything arises due to causes and conditions. Nothing is truly independent. This is the key to understanding why the world is the way it is. Imagine a row of dominoes. When one falls, the next one follows. But where did the first one come from? It didn't just appear out of nowhere. It too was set in motion by something before it. And so it goes. One cause leading to another, one event shaping the next. This is how reality unfolds. Your thoughts, your choices, your experiences, they are not random. They arise from countless factors, from your past actions, from the conditions surrounding you. Even a single moment of suffering or happiness is not isolated. It is connected to everything that came before it. This understanding changes everything. Many people believe that life is controlled by fate or by the will of an all-powerful being. But Buddhism offers a different view. The world is not dictated by a supreme entity. Instead, it is a vast web of interdependent events, constantly shifting, constantly changing. This is not just a philosophical idea, it is incredibly practical, because if everything depends on causes, then change is possible. If suffering arises because of certain causes, then by removing those causes, suffering can end. If happiness arises because of certain conditions, then by cultivating those conditions, happiness can grow. This is why the Buddha did not teach people to pray for salvation. He taught them to understand their own minds, their own actions. He taught that by changing our thoughts, our speech, and our actions, we can transform our lives. Think about it. Your anger, your fears, your doubts, they are not permanent. They arise due to causes. And if those causes change, they will fade away. The same is true for happiness, for wisdom, for peace. This is why the Eightfold Path is so powerful. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Each of these elements works to change the causes that shape our existence. The Buddha once said, "When this exists, that exists. When this ceases, that ceases." It is the simplest way to understand dependent origination. Nothing is fixed. Nothing is absolute. Everything is in motion. So what does this mean for you? It means you are not stuck. Your life is not set in stone. The struggles you face are not permanent. You have the power to change, to grow, to create a different future. The question is, will you keep letting old causes control your life? Or will you take action to create new ones? Because the truth is, every thought, every action, every moment sets something in motion. What will you choose to set in motion today? Buddhism speaks to more people today than ever before. Why? Because its wisdom is not limited by culture, religion, or background. It is universal. You don't need to follow a particular faith. You don't need to believe in a creator God. You don't even need to call yourself a Buddhist. The teachings of the Buddha are not about belief. They are about understanding, about seeing reality as it truly is. At its core, Buddhism is a path to awakening. An awakening is for everyone. Think about mindfulness, the practice of being fully present, aware of each moment without judgment. It's not just a Buddhist idea. It's a way to live more fully, to break free from the distractions and anxieties that pull us away from the present. Compassion, the ability to care for others, to see their suffering as our own. It's not tied to any religion. It's a fundamental part of being human. The Buddha taught that true happiness does not come from selfish desires, but from a heart that is open, understanding, and kind, and wisdom, the ability to see through illusions, to recognize what is real and what is not. This is not something reserved for monks or scholars. It is something that each of us can develop, no matter who we are, no matter where we come from. Even science is starting to catch up with what the Buddha discovered 2,500 years ago. Neuroscientists now know that meditation rewires the brain. It reduces stress, increases happiness, and strengthens our ability to focus. Studies show that compassion-based meditation changes the way we relate to others, making us more empathetic, more patient, more resilient. The Buddha didn't need brain scans or psychology textbooks to understand this. He simply looked deeply into his own mind and saw the truth. He saw that suffering arises from craving, from attachment, from ignorance. He saw that when we let go of these things, we find peace. This is the essence of Buddhism, not faith, not rituals, not dogma, just truth. So, do you need to believe in God to be spiritual? Buddhism says no. Spirituality is not about worshipping something outside of yourself. It's about waking up to your own mind, your own experience, your own potential for wisdom and compassion. This is why Buddhism resonates with people from all walks of life, monks and scientists, believers and non-believers, those searching for meaning and those simply trying to live a better life. Because at its heart, Buddhism is not about who you pray to or what you believe. It is about how you live. So the real question is not whether you believe in something greater than yourself. The real question is, are you ready to wake up? Does Buddhism reject the idea of God? Not exactly. It just doesn't make God the focus. Instead of asking, does God exist? Buddhism asks a different question. How can we end suffering? Because no matter what we believe, whether we follow a religion or not, suffering is real. Pain is real. And more than anything, we all seek peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. The Buddha's answer to this universal struggle wasn't based on faith. It wasn't about surrendering to an unseen force or hoping for divine intervention. It was about wisdom, deep, experiential understanding of the way things truly are. Not worship, but insight. Not waiting for salvation, but taking responsibility for your own awakening. This is the beauty of Buddhism. It doesn't ask you to believe in something outside of yourself. It asks you to look within, to examine your mind, to question your attachments, your fears, your illusions. It asks you to see clearly, to wake up. The Buddha never claimed to be a god, nor did he claim to be a messenger of one. He was a human being who discovered a path to liberation and shared it with the world. He taught that suffering arises from craving, attachment, and ignorance, and that the way to be free is not through prayer or devotion, but through wisdom, ethical living, and mental discipline. This is why Buddhism is different. It does not rely on external salvation. It teaches that enlightenment is in your own hands. No one, not even a god, can do the work for you. And yet, Buddhism does not deny the existence of divine beings. It acknowledges that there are realms beyond the human world, realms of powerful celestial beings, devas, spirits, and forces beyond our understanding. But even they are not beyond suffering. Even they are caught in the cycle of birth and death. So whether one believes in God or not is not the central question in Buddhism. The real question is, are you willing to open your eyes? Are you willing to see the causes of suffering in your own life? Are you willing to take that first step toward freedom? Because in the end, Buddhism is not about belief. It's about direct experience. It doesn't tell you what to think. It invites you to see for yourself, to meditate, to reflect, to test the teachings in your own life. And when you do, something extraordinary happens. You begin to understand, not through blind faith, but through your own insight. you begin to wake up. Maybe that moment is now. If this resonates with you, if it makes you think, then let's keep exploring together. There is so much wisdom in the teachings of the Buddha, so many ways to transform suffering into peace, confusion into clarity. So take a deep breath, bring your attention to this moment, and remember, the path to enlightenment begins with a single step, and that step could be this one.